Let's check in with Joseph Lindsley in Ukraine.
Joe. Little fucking Joe Lindsley.
Joe Lindsley is quickly becoming an American treasure in broadcasting.
Welcome to Ukraine Bank.
Overnight, there have been retaliatory strikes delivered to Russia from Ukraine. Let's get the latest from Joseph Lindsley. Hello, Joe. What's going on today?
Hey, Bob. Good afternoon from Lviv. A rainy day, and at least in many Ukrainian cities, it's been a quiet morning compared to what we had since last Thursday and Friday. And it's really extraordinary to consider. Since Thursday evening, December 28th, until yesterday morning, Russia launched about 500 rockets, 500 missiles, many of these advanced, some of them hypersonic, to Ukraine. And Ukrainian air defense was able to stop almost all of them, which is an extraordinary feat. And I didn't even realize that until later yesterday. But, in the history of modern warfare, we've never seen air defense work so incredibly well against such a vehement machine and onslaught. And so as difficult as those days were, the Ukrainian air defense is always refining and is proving itself to be very capable. But then, of course, there's the key caveat that, that's mainly reliant upon Ukraine having the supplies it needs, especially those Patriot missiles from the U.S. to shoot down whatever Russia sends over this way. And so it's people are trying to figure out the past day, what is Russia up to in such an intense barrage of attacks? It could be psychological warfare on one level. It does wear people out, but it certainly does do a lot to deplete these stockpiles of air defense. And when we think about this, the idea of retaliation, it comes up in curious ways. For example, last week, when I was on Thursday night and Friday morning, when Russia attacked cities, including Kharkiv, Russia sent 23 missiles to the city of Kharkiv. 23 missiles to Kharkiv, which is an extraordinary number. I don't think there's ever been that many missiles sent to that city, even though that city's been so heavily bombed. And a few hours later, Ukraine attacked in a small way. It's very fuzzy on the details. A Russian city that's near Kharkiv, from which the Russians frequently attack Kharkiv and that region. And it was hours after that small Ukrainian attack, in which it seems that Russian civilians were killed. Then Russia launched its next wave of attacks on Saturday, where they really pounded the center of Kharkiv. And then we saw, of course, the attacks yesterday morning. But it's interesting that the headlines on Friday the headlines on Saturday were calling Russia's attacks on Ukraine retaliatory. For example, The Guardian says Russia bombed central Kharkiv after Ukrainian attack on Belgorod. Newspapers all over the world, the BBC, everyone was framing the story in this way, that Russia's horrible attacks on Kharkiv were retaliation for this tiny Ukrainian attack on Belgorod. And most of these stories make no reference to the hours before Ukraine attacked Belgorod in Russia, the Russians had sent 23 missiles to Kharkiv. And so I think we easily kind of get caught up in these narratives. What does the word retaliation mean? And I think when we get stuck using that word, it moves this whole concept away from something that can be won. It becomes just a tit-for-tat. And I think in the language of warfare, it's not about retaliation. It's about strategic maneuvering to defeat the enemy. And it's not, oh, you did this to me, so we're going to do this to you. The strategy is much more longer term than that. And this is why it's very curious what happened in Belgorod. I mean, a lot of people were analyzing it. The United Nations was swift to condemn Ukraine for what happened in Belgorod. But then people began to analyze it. And, it's same things that we saw with that story of the attack on the hospital in Gaza. Immediately everyone said, oh, Israel destroyed the hospital. But then I looked at those photos myself, and I've seen plenty of missile craters, moments after their arrival. And it didn't look like it was a huge missile that hit that hospital. And there was similar analysis of what happened in Belgorod. So we can't know for sure. And in the Russian, especially in the Putin method of operation, going back to 1999 when he was really taking power, the Russians do like false flag attacks. And the Russians openly mentioned this little attack on Belgorod to justify everything they've done, these almost 500 missiles the past several days. And so I think we should be a little bit cautious when we hear the word retaliation.
Yeah, in the race to be first, even highly respected news organizations sometimes are not as thoughtful as they should be. And I was thinking about another one of your insights, Joseph. You talked about this many times, how misleading the dollar figure is that's attached to the weapons that the United States is sending to Ukraine. And I heard Adam Kinzinger talk about this the other day, and he said he was talking about the money we're giving to Ukraine, the dollar amount, and he said it's the value of our weapons that we're sending, and those weapons, most of them, were going to time out anyway. They had to be replaced, so they'd go to the junkyard or they'd be blown up, but instead, they can go to Ukraine. And it's very interesting to kind of get behind the news and analyze this more closely than, what we usually get, isn't it?
Exactly. And it would be nice if the White House, when they make these pending spending pitches to Congress, if they mention that. And it's very curious why it's very simple to clarify that. They're not asking for $100 billion of new money or $60 billion in every spending package. And they don't clarify that. And I think this is where we also have to get into some of the psychology of this. But, there are many people in Washington, in the Pentagon, in the think tanks that don't believe that Russia can be defeated, or they don't want to believe, as I've said before, from the late Henry Kissinger, he said just over a year ago, the world needs Russia in the global equilibrium. And it's like an article of faith for many of them, and they can't envision a world beyond that. They're very sort of timid in that sense, and so they can hide behind, we're supporting Ukraine with money, but the fact is, if it's not the right type of weaponry and the permission to hit those bases in Russia, which became so apparent these past days. I mean, okay, Ukraine can defend its cities as long as there's a supply of air defense, but these attacks can keep coming. And Russia knows that. Russia knows that one day the air defense is going to run out, the world's going to burn out from this, and then they can really take Ukraine. And so until the moment when Ukraine's able to use the weapons that America has, as retired General Ben Hodges says, there are so many of those ATACMS, long-range missiles, in storage in the U.S., and it would not be a problem to get them here. And I think, it's almost an impossible exercise, but maybe helpful to look at what would the stories be if this war wasn't happening? The U.S. is always buying new weapons for itself. We're always developing. And so a lot of these, in these spending packages, it also includes the real money that it includes is money for new weapons for the United States. But a lot of those weapons would be purchased anyway. It just gets shoved into the Ukraine package. This is, these are the games of Washington. And I think, the unfortunate, but maybe the fortunate thing is, if Ukraine is to get victory, Ukraine's going to need these long-range weapons. It's going to need permission to use them. And if that's going to happen, something's going to have to change dramatically in Washington. And that's scary, but also it's a hope that maybe something can be transformed. And, as we sit and talk, and here is a calmer day, it is, when you're far away, it's easy to get, as a friend here said, it's easy to get tired of it. But when you're here, you don't get tired of it because of the adrenaline. And I think as I was taking a run today through Lviv and there was no air raid alarm, the impact of hearing missiles hit, as I did several days ago, mere blocks away from you, that doesn't leave you. Everyone here carries that sort of trauma within them. And so here everyone is devoted to the cause and fighting, but it is very difficult to get people far away to wake up to the reality.
I can't imagine knowing what that's like unless you're there. And I know these are especially tough, frustrating times for you. So let me close by sharing a couple of messages from listeners. Bob, my husband and I plan our morning around your daily call from Joe. The information he shares puts a face on the brave Ukrainians who are suffering while also showing their unwillingness to give in to communism, or what I call the evil empire. Thank you for continuing this very important work. And one more here. This morning, Bob Sirott commented that some listeners are no longer interested in the Ukraine update segment with Joseph Lindsley. I want to provide feedback that this segment is extremely informative for me and the main reason I'm listening to WGN Radio more. So thanks to Pam and thanks to John for those messages. Nice to hear that, isn't it, Joe?
It's great to hear that. And communism is the right word. By the way, the main Russian air base from which the attacks were launched is still named after to this day, the co-author of the Communist Manifesto. So if anyone thinks Russia has changed for those days, it hasn't. So thank you for that great feedback, and I look forward to talking tomorrow.
Be well, Joe. Appreciate it.
Thank you for introducing Ukraine on your social media pages. That's very important that much more people can get more information about the situation here and how everybody can help Ukraine to stay stronger and to save all the world.
Что он сказал?
Well, which side are you on?
На чьей ты стороне?
Come on now. Oh, which side are you on?
На чьей ты стороне?
Ебать.